with the Olympics, I mean, it's a global event that really is about the spirit of coming together, the creative assets that are coming out of the LA 28 team. They've done a really amazing job on their graphics, and the color story behind that is very, I would say, California, but it's really optimistic and bright. There's pinks and blues and yellows. I looked at it and I was like, this is feeling very optimistic, and we are hoping that, yes, 2028 is going to be that year of change. With a color like Radiant Earth, we're not talking about, a change that's necessarily disruptive. It's more like warmth, comfort, and energy that will bring about that change.
That is Jennifer Birch, CMF Senior Strategist at WGSN Sport and Outdoor. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Create Tomorrow podcast. I'm your host, Cassandra Napoli, Head of Consumer Forecasting at WGSN. Every 2 weeks, I will take you on a journey to examine how trends are translated into aesthetics and product design. In this episode, we'll hear from Jennifer Birch. Jennifer shares with us the color of the year for 2028 and demystifies the color forecasting process. We touch on the role these colors will play across industries, from consumer tech and interiors to the aerospace sector. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here. Can you please share who you are, what you do, and a bit about your career journey so far as well?
Yeah. Hi, Cassandra. I'm Jennifer Birch, and I am a senior CMF strategist for WGSN for sports and outdoor. So that means that I work on everything related to color, material, and finish, which is what CMF stands for. And as far as my career so far, it's definitely taken me on a pretty curvy path, but I started in apparel with sports performance apparel design, and I moved into footwear at some point. And then from there, I really felt like CMF, as it relates to industrial design and hard goods, was something that genuinely interested me and kept me engaged and wanting to learn more. So I eventually got into other industries where CMF plays a pretty large role, like consumer tech. I've also worked in the automotive space, and that took me into the aerospace industry, which was super fascinating and just amazing learning experience. And then that was right before I ended up working at WGSN and going back to sort of my roots, which was in sports and outdoor.
What does CMF look like in the aerospace industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked that quite a bit, and a lot of times people think, "Oh, did you work on the spacesuit?" To be frank, I worked at SpaceX, and no, I did not work on the spacesuit. That was a whole team. My responsibility as a CMF designer on the industrial design team there was spacecraft, so existing and future. So anything that's going up now would occasionally need refurbishment and CMF attention. So I worked on existing spacecraft as well as ones that are being developed for the future. And it is basically anything that you can touch, see or touch. It goes from interiors, trying to determine what would be needed in a space that would have humans going on the spacecraft. Much less involved when it's just cargo, but when it's humans, it's very important, as well as like the rockets, exterior of the rockets, and things that are related to what goes on the outside and what can be seen and how it looks on broadcast and things like that. So it was really
fascinating.
Yeah.
I feel like you've just sparked an idea for a future podcast for me. So thank you.
Sure.
The reason that we're here today, though, is to discuss probably one of the most buzzy moments for WGSN throughout the year, which is the color of the year. Right now, we're in 2026, but we're looking to 2028 with this color of the year. What is the key color for 2028?
Right. So the key color for 2028 is called Radiant Earth, and it is gorgeous. It's a beautiful sort of deeper shade of orange, but I like to say that it actually has the personality of a red. So it's pretty dynamic, but at the same time, it's very rooted in nature. When we got together to determine it, I think that was something that really resonated with us, that we wanted to keep it grounded.
How did you end up with Radiant Earth? So it's quite a bold and strong color. What led to this being the choice for 2028? And why do we feel such a strong color felt right for that moment in time?
Right. So when we get together and we look at like where we have just been. Everything as an evolution is super important to consider. And in the most recent color choices, we went from Future Dusk, which is a kind of a deeper, restorative purpley tone, to Transformative Teal, which isn't right now, 2026. Also rooted in Earth, but speaking of space, it was like how the Earth appears from space is this beautiful teal color. So that was sort of the inspiration for that. We feel like that hits right now. And then for Luminous Blue for 2027, it's like we're starting to, as the name implies with luminous, starting to pick up on a little bit more energy and bring luminescence into color, but it's still a very soothing choice and still in the blue space. So when we were discussing evolution, we all felt it was time to kind of bring some energy back, but we wanted to still keep it grounded. And I do feel like this color is, while inspired by earthly elements like red clay or things that are sun-baked, it's very healing, we think, but it evokes sort of a warmth and a comfort that we think is still needed. So we're kind of coming out of not hibernation, but we're coming out from the cooler space that was a little more restorative and then back into reclaiming sort of some energy, but keeping it nature-led in the narrative.
Yeah, when you say it's time for more warmth to come through after years of sort of cool tones, what macro factors really triggered this shift? Can you talk us through a little bit about what it's like to be in the room? I imagine it's just a bunch of our color forecasters kind of debating.
Yeah.
It seems pretty intense. Can you walk us through the process?
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite literally my favorite part of this job is when we do this. We meet, twice a year. We meet often on a lot of things, but for the color forecasting in particular and determining the color of the year, we meet after, for a week. We kind of, get into a room and have really amazing conversations. But I would say that the color forecasting team, which is made up of, a lot of industry experts. So I'm there to represent sports and outdoor. We have beauty, all the variations of fashion, menswear, womenswear, accessories, active, alongside consumer tech and interiors team. So obviously we all bring a different perspective, but we're all in our steady state would be to constantly be doing research in between these forecasting workshops. So we all have built up, the amount of research that we've done that's ongoing, and then we share it. We strategize, we prepare. So my job is to come to the workshops and sort of present to my colleagues who are all incredibly brilliant. And I think that's why I love it so much, is because I'm always learning a lot from the conversations we have. But we all info share, we download each other, and like, here's what we're seeing, here's what we think is important, that what might be needed here, or we'd like this to continue. So we spend a decent amount of time sort of presenting our research to each other, and then the conversations start. And inevitably, even though we're working, separately from each other most of the time in between the workshops, when we see that things that we've aligned, we know that there's something there. So this is one of those colors that we all kind of showed up with a variation on this color. And so we decided that that happens repeatedly. And for now, it shouldn't surprise me anymore, but it always feels really good when you see the alignment. I don't know why this surprises me, but because we are all so, deep in research and maybe sometimes seeing some of the same things and picking up on some of the same things from cultural perspectives and a global perspective for sure, because we have strategists around the world that also weigh in on this process, is that we often, have alignment right off the bat, which means it tells us that, like, okay, this is something we should pay attention to. And Radiant Earth is one of those colors. So we had all, felt like after Luminous Blue, which it was another one where we came up and everyone had that color kind of highlighted as important. Maybe because of that, we thought, what is a natural shift coming from, our evolution coming from, 3 seasons of maybe cooler tones, even though they're very different, they do different things. But we all showed up with something that was in the warmth and restorative comfort space. And when you ask about macros, we always consider it. So the macros are determined at a high level at WGSN with really brilliant people. We map everything to, when we have these conversations, we always are mapping it back to macros and emotions to ensure that we are really listening to the things that we've just spent a lot of time researching and pulling together from a consumer's perspective, what we think they'll respond to, commerciality. Like it goes well beyond just like, oh, it's time for an orange or something like that. So it's very, very vetted in our conversations, and that we take the one day to present to each other. In the days following, this is when we get to the business of actually having to choose the hue. And I think like that's where we then say, is this something that will work across all verticals? And Radiant Earth is definitely one of those ones that everyone felt would work for them.
Can I ask, so how do you research, right? You say you all come with research. What types of research goes into it? And how, most importantly, I think, is how does data come into play? Because
Yeah.
WGSN has so much access to just really amazing proprietary and third-party data. How does that play a part in selecting the color of the year?
Right. So it is very important, and it's something that we are really, continuing to improve upon. So it's a process and figuring out what would make meaningful data for color, because it's not as obvious as it might seem, because it is, it can be very subjective. But I feel like from a research standpoint, I would be remiss if I only looked at, sports and outdoor. I try to look at and think about what the designers in this space are inspired by. And it's a lot of, things that are happening culturally and in community, in art, anything has an impact in the creative spaces, as well as looking at activities that are new and up and coming, and what that might mean. What are the new activities up and coming in sports and outdoor that are bringing something to our emotions? What is it providing? If we're seeing, something like soft adventure has been trending, which is, entry into the outdoor spaces, that may, people are wanting to experience it that may not have done it. Are there barriers to entry, and are they being removed? And why is that? So the research goes a lot deeper than just, oh, here's something I found that was a nice color. However, it is important to kind of like figure out, how do we translate that into color? And this is where the expertise comes in, as far as like understanding how to map a consumer emotion into what colors work with that emotion. So that is sort of the essence of what we bring from a research standpoint. And then from the proprietary AI perspective and the data, we use it to really, it's almost like a mirror or reflection back to us to say, yes, we actually did bring a certain amount of this type of color. Maybe sometimes we're surprised by what the data shows, like, oh, we really leaned into green, or, in this case, we were really feeling warmth. So we have a couple of colors that are, in key colors that are bringing that warmth. And so we kind of reflect on that and say, well, the data is telling us that this is something that isn't just imaginary. We're not ignoring, we don't have a blind spot here. We're really noticing, based on what the data is showing, that we showed up with a certain level, a certain hue, desaturation, saturation, and that is what data provides to us. That is super helpful, so that we're not, putting any sort of personal bias on anything. It really kind of clears the air and makes it very easy to see trends from like a graph perspective on, which colors are maybe showing up more in our research.
Yeah, and in terms of how our macro forecasting works, is obviously everything starts with the consumer. So we do consumer forecast for 2028, 2.5 years before it actually hits. So we had the key emotions for 2020 already when you went to go ahead and determine the color of the year. How did some of those emotions show up in your conversations? So, for context for those listening who might not be familiar, some of the key emotions that we've already forecasted for 2028 are flourishing and snark and quietude. Particularly, I feel like quietude, maybe inspired resilience, and flourishing really fit in here. But how does emotion really play a part in determining what that color of the year is?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about color of the year specifically, I feel like it can be, a combination. We're, complex individuals, so sometimes it's not just, bucketed into one. But so, for example, I feel that flourishing and inspired resilience really speak to the color of the year, Radiant Earth, and that's because flourishing is about, hope that's ascending, and anything that's like worth working for, that's hopeful. We're getting into that space of where that's where the energy is going to come from. We're kind of wanting to reclaim the narrative. And that speaks to then inspired resilience, where we need to work together to solve problems. And I think when I hear the word resilience, I do think of something that's like related to the earth and how resilient our earth is, environment is, even though we're in a space where we really are, in a bit of a crisis right now, and maybe for the foreseeable future, considering that some things have gone a little backwards. So we are ready to really elevate the fact that we need to focus on our resilience and get inspired to like solve the problems together and be collaborative. And there is something else to be considered, like maybe we have old answers to new questions. And so the fact that this color is rooted in nature, but it has a certain energetic quality, like I think, the afterglow and things that are luminescence and radiant, I think will help kind of inspire us moving forward. So when we determine, hey, this color is looking really new, or, it's looking appropriate for 2028, we really do take our time to, put it in put some words to it. We all kind of think about those words that we've put to it. What is it meaning to us? And then we say, where does this fit with an emotion now? So we take a lot of time to map that out to make sure that everyone kind of has that conversation and we all are in agreement. And in this case, I think it applies to both flourishing and inspired resilience. And then some of our other key colors will map to some of the other emotions as well.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a bit. I just want to finish up here on Radiant Earth by asking, obviously, you and I are both based here in the US. I'm wondering how massive sort of events or moments that are really set to take place in 2028, namely a US election, which represents an end of a Trump presidency, which is massive, and also the US or the LA Olympics, rather. So the Summer Olympics set to take place in 2028 in Los Angeles. How do these sorts of events really reflect this color, and how can we anticipate it to show up and really resonate amongst this sort of time in our nation's history?
With the Olympics, I mean, it's a global event that really is about the spirit of coming together. I pointed out as a part of my research is the creative assets that are coming out of the LA28 team, to inspire, participation or like wanting to engage with the Olympics events that are coming. They've done a really amazing job on their graphics, and the color story behind that is very, I would say, California, but it's really optimistic and bright. There's pinks and blues and yellows, and I brought that definitely to the workshop for conversation. I wasn't the only one, but I looked at it and I was like, this is feeling very optimistic, and we are hoping that, yes, 2028 is going to be that year of change. And again, it can't, in my mind, with a color like Radiant Earth, we're not talking about, a change that's necessarily disruptive. It's more like warmth, comfort, and energy that will bring about that change.
So Radiant Earth is the color of the year, but there are other colors, key colors featured in our forecast. Can you talk us through those 5 colors that are set to make a splash in 2028?
Yeah, absolutely. We have one of my other favorite, I mean, I love them all for different reasons, but Positively Yellow, I think, is one that I really am looking forward to seeing sort of come to fruition in various ways in 2028. And to me, I look at it as, opening up through the drapes and letting the sun come in. It's like a ray of sunlight. We've had yellows, leading up to, as key colors leading up to this year, they're 2028 that we're forecasting, but they've been a little bit more like maize or something that's a little more in the mustard space, which is super beautiful. It renders really well in a lot of different materials, but this one is just optimistic. So we called it Positively Yellow, and it's an amazing color. Another one that's kind of in a similar vein as far as it being pretend, getting back to nature narrative, is Offline Blue. And this is a very stable selection for a key color because I feel like there are few colors as trustworthy as blues are in a range of colors. So we wanted to inspire, sort of like we've been into, obviously inspired by digital in the past and the exciting things that were happening in the digital landscape. But now we're taking things offline, and then upcoming generations are a little more wanting analog experiences. So this is a color that will remind us to like kind of step away when we need to and reset. And so we've called that one Offline Blue. It's a really beautiful color, but it's also very, I would call it, very trustworthy and stable. Another one is called Flourish Pink, and it's a nice soft pink. We have had, other brighter hot pink type colors in the past, but this one felt it's almost, inspired by, amazing foods and things that are really joyful. One of our emotions is, joyful audacity. And I think, the yellow can fit into that as well as this sort of flourish pink. It's nature inspired as well. It's not super, artificial. It is, floral in or guava like in its inspiration. And so I feel like that one is really kind of a soothing color, but uplifting as well. And then we have serene green, which is really speaks to the emotion of quietude and the reminder to step away when you need. And every time I look at that color, it's so soothing, and it like I feel like it lowers my heart rate when I look at it. And when I see images that I think relate to it, it just makes me want to reach out and hold it in my hand. It's incredibly important to remember to take time for yourself. We're still in a space of where wellness is very important. And this is well suited for that. So that's why it's aligned with the emotion of quietude.
I think serene green is my favorite.
Yeah.
It just is so soothing and so calming to look at.
Yeah. And that will continue to be important. I mean, we can talk about the importance of energy, but there has to be sort of the other side of it, which is sometimes you really need to just lower the heart rate and have something calming in your life.
Yeah, it's similar to offline blue, I guess, too, where it's like it
Mhm.
is soothing in that sense. And it does make me want to like never touch a digital device
Yeah,
ever again and like go touch
exactly.
some grass and maybe
Absolutely.
walk near the water or something.
I'm with you on that. Yeah.
A lot of these colors, they are quite like I'm not a color forecaster. So as sort of outsider here, I think they are quite conflicting, right? I think it speaks to what you were saying that like there's, we're feeling a lot of emotions. It's not sort of like a universal emotion being felt right now. So it kind of speaks to that, I think. Um, but as we live in a sort of end to end world where multiple things can be true at the same time, we're increasingly fragmented. Is it actually harder to forecast color because of just all of like the multiple universal truths that are happening? The fact that we're going offline, but we're also chronically online, right? So is it more difficult, do you think, to kind of come to a consensus and to land on these colors?
I mean, it seems like it would be difficult, but I think that our goal when we do choose these colors is to always achieve a balance. So we know that, our global communities and nothing is a monolith. So we can't make assumptions on, things that we think will work for everyone. So we just have to ensure that we've covered enough ground. And to me, it is like striking a balance. I mean, you can say obviously serene green does a different job than a positively yellow. But there will be needs for both. So we try to ensure that in combination, also some of these colors can really be uplifted in different ways. And I would say, yes, we've determined color of the year as a high priority. It's really important from a messaging and dynamic standpoint. Like, what is this really going to say? What is the tone that's going to be set? But we also have a whole seasonal palette to consider, an annual palette to consider, and long-term colors, all of which we refreshed for Spring Summer 28. And where some of the interesting conversations, come from are when we start making combinations and how different things look when you put colors next to each other. So they all need to be versatile and imagined that they are covering areas if there are needs. So you say consumer tech space might have a different need than footwear and accessories, for example, or menswear. So we really try to ensure that there's balance across all, and that it is something that whether it can be standalone in an all-over color or in combination work really well, that we've covered all those bases so that we can have this sort of like and approach.
Yeah, so interesting. What about Coloro? Where does
Mhm.
Coloro, WGSN's key color partner, fit in during the process?
Yeah, honestly, I cannot say enough about the Coloro system, and I'll say I used it before I started working at WGSN. When it was presented to me as an option for color standards, I was blown away because of how intuitive and how smart it is. So what we do is to ensure that we, have a frame of reference that contained is we only, we select all the swatches from the Coloro books. We lay them out on the table. We only use that as our point of reference so that when we're having these conversations, if somebody, has a thought like, I like that, but I wish it was a little bit more saturated, or I think it maybe needs to be a little bit cooler. Because it is very nuanced. Like it's not that easy to just pick, a color and be like, this is it. Like we definitely go through rounds and looking at it in different light as well. It's important. You don't necessarily want to just be stuck in a room with maybe not the best lighting and making very big decisions. So we take that very seriously. But if somebody says those things like, oh, I wish it was more saturated, we know where to go in the book and we pull an option that is a little more saturated. Then we take a look at it next to the original choice, for example. And then we have a larger, thing to look at, a larger conversation to be had about choices and what makes the most sense. So for me, it's an excellent resource, an excellent tool. So then when we land on, okay, we're feeling good. This is where we think all the swatches are in the right place. They have an amazing feasibility tool, which will tell us, hey, can we make sure that all of these colors for commercial reasons are feasible in different substrates or different fiber content, and they provide that. So that's something that we always check before we sort of finalize the palettes.
Like always, I ask all of my guests, who is somebody that they admire that is creating a new version of tomorrow that you find deeply inspiring? I feel like now I want to know more about your SpaceX era, and I feel like I would choose you because I want to know more. But who is your pick?
Well, I would say I'm going to choose, I have a couple, but I'm going to choose James Turrell, who's an incredible artist that often shows up on our inspiration boards and our research. He does a lot with immersive environments, and he has something that's getting ready to open, an installation that's getting ready to open in Denmark in June. It's called As Seen Below, and it's a skyscape. And what he does is he built a domed environment that's actually underground. It's mounted with grass on top, but you go in, and the environment within the dome is infused with different colors of light. So it's a very immersive, colorful experience. It's really beautiful and amazing what he can do with lighting. That's what he's known for. But he then has sort of removed the top so that there's a circle on the top where you can see the sky, and putting that view of the sky, in that context where you're surrounded by light, and then seeing what the sky looks like in various lit environments that you're standing in. It's remarkable, the impact of that. And it's the sky in all its beauty in various times of day, also various weather and things like that. It just provides just it maybe is sort of the opposite of looking at the Earth from space, in that you're looking up at space from this sort of beautifully illuminated environment, and how that might change your perspective on the sky. So I find him sort of infinitely inspiring from that point of view, and definitely his color choices in terms of illumination are amazing.
Thank you to my guest, Jennifer Birch, CMF Senior Strategist at WGSN Sport and Outdoor. If you're a WGSN subscriber, look out for more trends at WGSN.com. If you're not a subscriber, please come and discover our services. We'll be back with our next episode soon. In the meantime, you can catch the CEO of WGSN, Carla Buzasci, on our other podcast, Lives of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Cassandra Napoli. Be sure to follow to this podcast, and see you next time.